Crashes, fires, and 4 red flags. It was a chaotic opening day of the Japanese Grand Prix, but it was still McLaren who led the way at the top of the timesheets. From Racing News 365, my name is Nick Golding, and I'm delighted to be joined, as always, by lead editor Ian Parks. Ian, we've been the early birds once again at Racing News 365, and let's be honest, FP1 was a bit of a slow burn and nothing really caught the big headlines in terms of accidents. All of a sudden, FP2 comes along and, well, a huge 185 mile per hour crash for Jack Doohan, a spin for Fernando Alonso, and guess what? Not one, but 2 grass fires. It's been a bit of a bonkers day at Suzuka.
You used the word slow burner, and I don't think that was the pun that you meant
That
to
would have been
use, in
quite
all
clever. Well,
honesty. So,
it was a fast burner, to be honest. Let's be honest with you. It wasn't I think slow is probably the wrong word in that case. But yeah,
yeah,
that was clever, but I didn't mean to be clever. So I won't take the credit.
one of those quite remarkable days, really, that you just didn't see coming because, as you say, FP1, perfectly fine. Everything ran pretty much clockwork for normal. Predominantly, if you want to look at that session in isolation, it was a good session for Yuki Tsunoda because
Yeah.
he was the guy under the biggest spotlight. How was he going to perform alongside Max Verstappen in the Red Bull? And for all intents and purposes, he performed really well. He made Christian Horner happy. And if anybody can make Christian Horner happy, then that's the best thing possible inside that Red Bull garage, because with Yuki doing a good job, finishing just a tenth behind Max, that's exactly where they want Yuki Tsunoda to be for every session going forward, if at all possible, making sure, as Christian has pointed out, that their second driver is there for their first driver to ensure Max goes on to win a 5th successive driver's crown this season. And then, as you say, all hell quite literally broke loose
And then
for that,
some.
and then some for that second session.
Yeah.
Quite remarkable. Jack Doohan didn't compete in FP1.
Nope.
He had to give up his Alpine for one of the reserve drivers, one of the many reserve drivers on that Alpine roster, local hero Rio Hirakawa. And Rio did a reasonable job in the car. And then 7 minutes into the session, Jack just an almighty crash heading into turn 1. Apparently, we understand going into that corner, his car was doing something like 185 miles an hour, pirouetted twice through 360 degrees off the track across the gravel, and the left-hand side of his car hitting the barrier with one almighty crash. That was huge. Heaven knows what the G impact will have been on that, but nevertheless, it will have been quite significant. Mercifully for Jack Doohan, he was taken to the medical centre. Thankfully, he's come through unscathed, gone through the concussion protocols, no concussion there, should be okay for FP3 on Saturday morning, but now it is one almighty repair job for Alpine. We're led to believe that the incident was not driver related. It appeared, and from all the information that we've been able to glean so far, that going in to that corner, down the long start-finish straight, there was a tailwind. That would have had an impact. An additional impact would have been that it appeared to be the Alpine bottomed out on the approach to turn 1, and that would have just sent that car spiralling off the track, as we saw. Bottom line, as I've mentioned, Jack's okay. It's now a question as to whether the Alpine mechanics can get that car turned around in time, and it's going to be a long overnight job. More than likely, curfew is going to be broken by Alpine to get that car in any kind of running order for Jack to take part in FP3 on Saturday morning.
I think it's a massive credit as well to just how far the safety of these cars has come on. The fact that it was 185 miles per hour is what Alpine have said to various outlets, and the fact that Jack is, thankfully, okay. I mean, miraculous news given what the crash was, but I mean, that was kind of the catalyst for what went on to be just a remarkable stop-start FP2. I think in the end, there was about 35 minutes worth of delay. So in terms of long run data, there's been pretty much nothing gained, just quali runs from really FP1. But what was remarkable was, of course, we had the Doohan crash, about a 15-20 minute delay after that, almost within seconds, within the first couple of minutes. 4 minutes to be precise. Fernando Alonso, a pretty rare mistake for him, spinning off, and his car beaching the gravel, which kind of then was a second red flag. Once again, everything stopped. But the big question mark is the two following red flags, because we saw it last year once the Shanghai International Circuit had been resurfaced. We had not one, but two grass fires. Cameras remarkably showed sparks coming off the floor of two of the cars, Lewis Hamilton's being one of them, catching the grass, causing it to catch fire. And one of them in particular, the second red flag, which brought the FP2 session to an end, caught fire very, very quickly and started to spread. This is going to be a very, very interesting talking point going into Saturday, where the cars will be running in quali at their very lowest. Potentially not a problem on Sunday, given it is looking like it's going to rain. But I did not think, Ian, after Shanghai last year, we would ever see this again, let alone twice within the space of about 5 minutes.
Well, I'm going to highlight a comment that you made in
Oh, no.
our Slack, in our work Slack. No,
Oh, here we
it's a
go.
good one,
Here we
actually.
go. Okay.
It's a comment that you made in our Slack chat
Oh,
system
thank
that
you.
we have
Yes. Yes.
that we
What are you going
have
to say?
for our work colleagues, both on .com and .nl. And you mentioned, as FP1 was about to start, you said that grass looks awfully dry.
It looked knackered.
Well, yeah,
A
it
bit like
is
me, to be
actually.
honest.
Yep, there's not a tinge of green anywhere on any of that
No.
grass looking around that Suzuka circuit. It's been obviously must be quite a long time since they had any rain. Well, that could ultimately be addressed on Sunday if that's going to be the case, because we are expecting a wet Grand Prix, folks, but we'll get onto that in a moment. As you said, Nick, grass looked dry, and you don't think anything of it when you make a comment like that. But lo and behold, to have not one but two grass fires, the first one coming out of the turn 11 hairpin, not quite sure where the second one took hold around the circuit, but nevertheless, that one spread quite quickly compared to the first. Obviously, both were dealt with in short order by the trackside marshals. And you assume now, as occurred with what you mentioned took place in Shanghai last year in the one and only practice session when there was a grass fire ahead of last year's Chinese Grand Prix, that chemicals were doused around the grass going into the rest of the sessions over the Chinese Grand Prix weekend. You would assume that similar is going to happen for this weekend. Of course, that will be checked out with the FIA. I'm sure they're on top of that, just to ensure that there will be no repeat for FP3 and qualifying, because quite obviously it's had a major impact on today's running. Just to clarify, we lost 36 minutes in total, 23 minutes for the red flag following the Jack Doohan crash, 8 minutes for the red flag following Alonso's trip into the gravel after he put a wheel on the grass going into the Degner 2 curve there. Another 5 minutes for the first red flag, and then 2 minutes right at the end, the session was red flagged. So we lost that as well. And that was it then. That was the end of the running for that particular day. The cars were never going to get out again. So only 24 minutes of running in total. Pretty much every single team, their run plans ripped up to shreds. Nobody really got a good idea of long run pace. We got a smidgen of an idea of short run pace, qualifying pace.
Yeah.
And as you say, Nick, it was the McLarens that came out head and shoulders above anybody else from those teams that were able to get a reasonable shot at a soft tyre run late on in the session there. But it was all up in the air. We do not really know who has got what, but for the most part, right now, McLaren's 0.4 of a second clear of anybody else. Oscar Piastri narrowly ahead of Lando Norris. It's looking good at this stage, but we cannot read too much into it, because, as I say, everybody's run plan was just thrown out the window with those 4 red flags. Quite a session we've got coming up in FP3. That should lend itself to a really good qualifying, you would hope for.
It's definitely going to be an FP3 worth waking up early for. If you are in Europe and Africa, of course, we'll be up early. And actually, a quick shout out to somebody who commented on Thursday's F1 update, Understated Excellence. Thank you. A very, very kind message asking if I'm okay. Saying I looked, quite tired or under the weather. I am pretty tired. I've been the unfortunate one of Racing News 365, along with Ian, who has the early shifts for the Japanese Grand Prix. It goes around, we all get to do them. But no, a very, very kind message. So thank you. I'm okay. Just battling through the early shifts. So apologies if my words are a little bit mumbled, working my way through it. But you mentioned there, Ian, McLaren were, in many ways, you could say, the best team on what we saw on Friday. As you mentioned, Lando Norris actually topped FP1. Yeah. Oscar Piastri topped FP2 ahead of Lando. Again, though, it's remarkable that we have lost so much running today. In terms of qualifying, yes, it looks very much that it is going to be McLaren, the team to beat, but long run pace Actually, in all fairness, for those who did get something in FP1, Mercedes don't look too far away. Ferrari look like they could be thereabouts, maybe in the podium fight. Red Bull as well, you never quite know what Max Verstappen, in this case Yuki Tsunoda, could put out the bag. Saturday does promise to be, particularly FP3, really, really fascinating.
And also, let's throw into the mix there, of course, the Racing Bulls
Oh,
duo of Isaac Hadjar
took the
and
words out of
Liam
my
Lawson.
mouth. Yeah,
Now, okay, not everybody managed to get those soft
no.
tyre runs in, as I mentioned, but nevertheless, the Racing Bulls showed really good pace on those soft tyres. Isaac third fastest, Liam fifth fastest. Now,
Welcome back,
if
Liam.
Liam, welcome back, Liam. Now, if Liam had come into today, Friday, these two practice sessions, low on confidence,
Yeah,
feeling that he needed to do something, then at least that soft tyre run there late on in FP2 will have uh, given him a degree of confidence, a bit of a shot in the arm going into qualifying. He needs something because obviously he will have taken quite a hit, as we know, bearing in mind what's happened. We've reported on it enough over these past week or so since the announcement
yeah,
came through that he'd been dropped by Red Bulls after Red Bull after just 2 Grand Prix, and of course was being demoted back to Racing Bulls with Yuki Tsunoda promoted alongside Max Verstappen. So I'm not going to discount them in all
yeah.
honesty
I don't think you
because
can't. They look
we
good.
do know, and it has been mentioned after the previous Grand Prix, that the Racing Bulls is good on qualifying pace. Not quite so good on race pace, but nevertheless, right now it looks like it's got certainly a Q3 contender of a car for Saturday qualifying for the Japanese Grand Prix. Yuki Tsunoda, as I mentioned, showed reasonable form in first practice, so he can be as happy as he possibly could be, bearing in mind, of course, he didn't get the running that he would have liked in FP2. Max struggling, you mentioned, with a little bit of confidence with the car. He made comments over the radio that the car felt slightly weird, that it was wriggling a little bit beneath him in FP1. Again, made a further comment about the car not quite performing as he'd like in FP2, but so much now to play for in FP3. The teams, they're going to be as quickly as possible out of that garage. You're going to see a long queue of cars at the start of FP3 looking to maximize that hour-long session, providing, of course, we don't have any more red flag chaos to throw into the mix, as we've seen today in FP2. But for now, McLaren, given the times that they've shown at the end of FP2, and those times, by the way, both by Lando and Oscar, were quicker, only by a tenth or so, but nevertheless quicker than the pole position set by Max Verstappen at this Grand Prix last year. Pirelli have estimated, given the change to the circuit that we've seen as well, predominantly through the first sector where it's been resurfaced, estimated that we're looking at lap times 1.5 seconds faster compared to last year. That was exactly the case in FP1, Lando compared to what Max set last year. And as I say, with Oscar and Lando both quicker than the pole time of Max from last year, we are looking at something considerably quicker going
Yeah.
into qualifying. It could be a case of who has got what it takes to be up there with the McLarens and give them a bit of a fight over the one lap showdown. We'll have to wait and see.
Final talking point, because this FP, this practice day, as you can tell by my words, has just turned my brain to complete mush. It feels, to be honest. I can't get my words out of my mouth for the moment. But let's end on the
All good,
weather
Lee. Don't worry,
because
mate. All good.
obviously it's been very, very warm today in Suzuka. Also going to be due to be quite warm on Saturday. The big question though is, what is the weather going to do on Sunday? Because that's a situation as well which is constantly changing, because the wind is also being pretty strong and is due to actually change direction on Saturday. But it's an interesting one, Ian, because we saw this in Australia where it's going to leave the teams quite a big decision, because Suzuka, as we know, isn't the easiest place to judge the forecast because it's near the coast. Of course, the wind changes a lot. And as we saw in Australia, Saturday for quali was completely dry. Sunday was, drenched with a heavy rain shower towards the later stages. In terms of setup and what they're going to do with the cars, there's going to be some big changes and some big talks happening overnight, because all of a sudden when quali's upon you and the car's going to Parc Fermé, that is it. Unless you want a
That is it.
penalty, nothing
Yeah.
else can be done.
I'm going to give you another shout out here, Nick, because
Way, I'm loving
yeah,
this. It's going well.
that's all right, mate. Go on to try and pick you up if you're struggling to get your
Thank you
words
very
out, but you've
much.
you've done well so far.
It's only Friday.
Basically, just to let people know, folks, that Nick is our pretty much our resident
Yes,
weatherman. If there's a guy that you want following the Grand Prix weather forecast over a race weekend, then it is our
me.
man, Nick Golding. He loves looking at those satellite images or whatever he can lay his hands on to try and ascertain what the picture is going to look like over the course of the 3 days of track running. And as he has rightly pointed out, right now, as we stand here on, where are we? Early Friday
Friday
afternoon,
morning.
UK time,
Yeah,
Friday evening, Japanese time.
yeah,
Right now, we are looking at a wet Sunday.
yeah.
We're looking at something very similar to what we saw in Australia on Grand Prix Sunday there. Perhaps the rain will not be quite as horrific as it was that particular day, because boy, did it chuck it down before the Grand Prix on that particular day. But yes, right now, we are looking at pretty much rain throughout all of Sunday. So no need to worry about any grass fires on Sunday at this stage, folks. That is most definitely not going to happen. But it becomes a case again for the teams as to what do they do in qualifying, as we saw in Australia. Do they go for that qualifying pace, that prime grid slot, but maybe offsetting that with, uh, a wet setup for the
Yeah.
Grand Prix on Sunday? Or do you try and um, work out what might happen on Sunday and therefore go for that wet setup, but compromising that one lap pace in the bid to ensure that you've got the best possible race car underneath you to cope with the conditions throughout what is more than likely now going to be a wet race on Sunday. Fascinating dilemma for the teams, all masked by the fact, of course, that they've not had any decent running through FP2 on Friday afternoon, because that is primarily when teams are able to get a good idea as to long run pace going into the weekend. So it's going to be a bit of catching up with their tails over the course of these engineering sessions coming out of Friday, going into Saturday, and then, of course, going out of Saturday's qualifying into the Sunday wet race, as we are discussing right here. It's going to be a fascinating weekend, folks, so stay tuned.
The underlying message, pretty much don't miss the rest of the weekend, because it looks like it's going to be a pretty good one. Be sure to comment below this video your thoughts on anything that happened on Friday. Did Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson impress you in their new seats? Let us know below, and just let us know any thoughts in general. Ian, amazing stuff as always. I will see you very early in the morning, so give us good luck, please, and good messages for tomorrow's F1 update, because it's going to be
We're
a
going to
long
need it.
weekend. We're going to need it. It's going to be good. Please be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and join Ian and myself after qualifying on Saturday. See you later, guys.
As always, take care, folks.